Hi and welcome to another live stream on this Flight Sim stream channel. I hope you enjoyed the previous ones. After two flights we ended up here in Rhodes, a little bit east of the island of Crete. Our next destination is Santorini, so we're going back west a little bit. Again, this will be quite a short flight, so we'll try to do all the setup and planning up front so that the flight itself can be more or less as planned. So here we are in the airport of Rhodes, the main airport, overlooking the island. On the left here is the city of Rhodes, and our plane is just parked here on the tarmac. It's cold and dark, so we'll do the full startup, initialize all the systems, and then we'll get going. So there's our plane with the Aegean livery. Let's jump into the flight deck. So here in the flight deck, everything still has to be initialized. To start off, we'll start with the flypad on the left hand side, which will load in most of our data that we need and that we already prepared in SimBrief. I have a separate video on how to use SimBrief for flight planning purposes. It's a nice free website which will allow you to do the majority of your flight plan for short flights, but also for longer flights, transatlantic flights and so on. So in the first page, the dashboard of flypad, you'll be able to connect to SimBrief and download the plan that you have in there. So we have a plan starting from Rhodes, of course, to Santorini, and there's all kinds of information like the weather. So I'll already note down this weather. We'll get a more recent update once we configure the CDU. So in Rhodes we have a QNH of 1017, which you can see here. The wind is 183 knots, so not too much wind. 17 degrees. And in Santorini we have 1017, same QNH, 205 knots, and then 16 Celsius. So that's already a good indication on the runways in use and so on. So the main item I'd like to set up first is the fuel, and we'll get it from our operational flight plan, which is provided also by SimBrief and is downloaded in here. So this is a very long document with all the details of the flight, the different legs that you will fly, the amount of passengers that you have on board, a flight log where you should note down the times when you pass which navigation points and so on. Wind information from your climb for the top of descent, NOTAMs for the different airports, runways in use, all kinds of information. We'll not go through all of this. The first section, however, has the plan fuel, which is quite interesting for us. You'll see the breakdown of the fuel between trip fuel, contingency for 50 minutes, fuel to go to the alternate, and in this case it's Athens, our alternate. So there's a minimum takeoff fuel, which is 4.5 tons. And then we have also a little bit of taxi fuel, 200 kilos, so we put that together as a 4.7 tons of fuel that we should at least have on board. So this is a number we'll use to initialize our flight. And we'll also ask the airport to load up the fuel in the plane. Now we have more fuel than this on board, so we have about 9 tons, which is good, but we will not need all of this. So I'll put 4.7 tons in as per the plan, and we'll start refueling the plane, in this case taking out fuel, which is normally not something you would do, but okay, just for this flight I like to follow the plan that we had there. Right, so fuel is being loaded on board, and then we can continue with the rest of the setup. To do this, I will be using some checklists, as also I did in the previous flights. Those checklists, I'll project them from time to time if necessary on the side. So to start off, the section of the cockpit pre-flight, we'll always check if all the levers and so on are already in place before we start up the plane itself. So first we'll check that the parking brake is on. That's this one here. We'll also check that the flaps are up, which we confirm there. The spoilers are retracted in this position and they are disarmed, so down. The weather radar is off and the predictive wind shear is also off. Engine master switches are both off, and I'll switch back to the cockpit view. Master switches are both off. The mode selector in the middle is also off. And the thrust levers are in idle. We can quickly check this and make sure they're in idle. The gear is down and the wipers, so gear down, we'll check here. And the wipers are also off, which is on top here. So that's our cockpit pre-flight completed. The next section is the cockpit preparation itself. So now we can start powering up the system. So first of all, when we have external power, we'll go to the overhead panel. And we see that that's available, so we can add external power to the airplane. And we switch on batteries 1 and 2 and check that the voltage is in the normal range for those batteries. Then we check the accumulator and brakes pressure, which is over here. Cockpit lights as required. So for cockpit lights, we make sure that the screens are quite visible. So there's a couple of buttons that we can use to set that up. So this provides more contrast while flying. Also on the FCU, we can add some backlight and also more lights from the switches. Here, the floodlight we will turn on, the integrated light will also turn on, some backlights for the buttons that we will press. And then we go back to the overhead, where there's also this rotating knob that we can turn up all the way, so we have more backlights here. Good. Next point is the instrument display. So this one we also put as required. We'll test the APU. So the section on top here, this is the APU fire system. We'll test the APU fire by clicking on the test button. We'll check the crew supply oxygen. We can test the cockpit voice recorder by pressing this button. And moving on, we'll align the ADIRS, the inertial reference platform. In the middle section, we can start the APU, the generator in the back of the plane that will provide bleed air for starting the engines and also provides electrical power. So next we'll turn on the wing lights, the nav and the logo lights. We'll make sure seatbelt signs are on, that the non-smoking is in auto, that the emergency exit lights are armed. And we continue up. We check if the temperatures are here okay for the cabin, but that's less important at this moment. Next we'll turn on fuel pumps. I usually wait until the APU is started, as it takes some load to turn them on apparently. But we can continue the flow now. We can also test the engine 1 fire system and the engine 2 fire system. So that's done. Let's go back to our cockpit view here. And we go to the FCU and we put on the constraints. This configuration we can do later, but the QNH we can already put in. 1017 is the one that we got from the weather earlier. So flight directors are both on. We check this. And we make sure that this is an arc and has 10 nautical miles, so the AFIS is correctly setup. Then FCDU, as I said, speed and heading, we'll adjust it after we enter our flight plans. And then it's time to set up the MCDU, which is this box here. The MCDU is the interface towards the flight management system. It's more or less the box that contains all this, the computer and everything inside. But yeah, it provides access to the flight management systems. Here we go to ATSU and AOC. On the top we initialize the flight, and this will also take a download from SimBrief. It immediately put the departure airport correct. The destination airport is also correctly set up now. Fuel on board 4.8 tons. We can validate that 4.8 tons here. Then we can go back to the ACU menu here. Weather requests. Yeah, I should put in the airports that we will be needing, but later when we initialize the flight plan, they will be initialized automatically, so I'll do that in a later stage. Weight and balance, I can also request the passengers to be put on board, so we'll send the request to get 87 passengers on. The fueling has been completed, so that's okay, and we can start the boarding process. This will be important data for the performance of the takeoff performance, that the weights are already correctly distributed on the plane. Next, data section. We go to aircraft status. We'll check that the database is in a valid range. It's 30th of December and 26th of January is the expiry date of this AirX cycle. Nice thing that the FlyByWire team added just recently is a remote control of the MCDU, of the complete MCDU. So on my iPad next to me here, I can actually control, I have the same screen, I can control this this box. So that's an easier way, but I'll make a separate video on how to set it up. So for now I'll just do it the old school way. Next, when we checked that the database is active, we can go to the init page, and here again we send an init request so that the necessary values are pre-populated. So this is our Aegean A320 flight number. Alternate is Athens, which is in here. We have a flight level of 220 today, cost index 7, so we'll be very conservative with fuel in the way that we'll fly, but I'll put that a little bit higher for now, not that it matters so much on a short flight. Good. The flight plan next. Here we'll discuss both the takeoff and the landing that we are preparing, or that we're planning to do. The first chart that I'm using, so I'm using Navigraph charts. It's an add-on for Flight Simulator that allows you to download or use all the charts, Japanese charts that are required for this flight immediately. So in the cockpit, that's quite easy. You also have an app on the iPad next to you, but this makes it a bit better for streaming, so I can also show what's going on. It also allows you to put your plane position on there, so you can see this is the airport of Rhodes, and we're parked here. It has all the information, like the radio channels, if you would need the ATIS, if you need ground, this is the frequencies to tune into. Airport elevation 19 feet, so more or less at sea level. Yeah, so that's basically the layout. Here's a VOR, that's the Rhodes VOR that we will need later in our departure. Going to the standard instrument departure, today we'll be using the VANE2 Lima departure. I'll make the screen a little bit bigger so we can see the details of the map better. So this is for Rhodes, Greece, the SID of the VANE2 Lima departure, based on the Rhodes Papa Alfa Romeo VOR, and also the Romeo Delta Sierra VOR, which is located a little bit offset from the airport. So the procedure is depicted graphically, but also described in words. The intention is to climb on the radial 245 of the Rhodes VOR to 10 DME from the VOR. So just take off, climb straight ahead, and at 10 DME we make a right turn to 319 track to intercept a point on the 274 radial from the Rhodes VOR. The other VOR is called Rhodes, but this one is called Romeo della Sierra. So this point is, so we intercept this radial and then we continue to VANES, and then we join the Bravo 34 airway, and that's where we then continue. So basically straight out, turn to the right, and then intercept this VOR. So I'll put this one, as this is the one that we'll have to intercept in our RadNav system later on. But okay, this is the departure that we will fly. So clicking on the airport, we'll select a departure, runway 24. A little bit of crosswind since the wind's coming from the south, 180, 3 knots, but that's of course still okay to depart from this runway. Let's find the VANE2 Lima, which will be very much at the bottom. Here we are. So runway 24, VANE2 Lima, insert. And this one will end up in VANES, which is the same point that we will start our flight from. So we'll clear this point. I didn't press clear, I think. Let's go up a bit, clear. And also clear the discontinuity, because the next one is Eteru, which is the next point on our flight plan. So for the arrival in Santorini, we'll take, so I'll briefly show the flights. This is also the routing that we'll follow. This is our departure. Here is VANES, and from there we go to Eteru. Next kilos, adesso Astis and UVRIT is the last point on the leg before we start our arrival procedure. The arrival procedure here is initialized by SimBrief as the UVRIT1 Delta, but this is actually a RNAV arrival. So we're doing a VOR approach, which is based on VOR beacons. So we'll also do take the arrival that is based on the VOR. We could actually also just not use the standard approach, but I'll show that in a minute. So the UVRIT1 Charlie. This one is a normal star based on for runway 15 arrivals. So that's the runway that we will take again, because this is the one that will be used with the prevailing wind at this moment. Here we will end up in UVRIT, and we'll continue to 16 DME from Santorini VOR and make a right arc on 14 DME distance from the Santorini VOR still to come to Corax, and which will be our initial approach fix. That's where then the procedure would start for the VOR. Alternatively, this UVRIT, it could also be our initial approach fix, so we can start our initial approach here at UVRIT, and we'll fly the same routing. So 16 DME from Santorini, we turn right, 14 DME arc around Santorini, and here we intercept the localizer of the Santorini VOR on a course of 155 and descend all the way down to the runway. So passing Corax as well. Okay, so let's set it up in the system. Our arrival will be for the VOR 15, and I will put a no star for this moment. We'll start our arrival at the at UVRIT at the point mentioned before. So UVRIT, and then here the coding is quite direct. Let's say from UVRIT we'll go to C Charlie Fox 15. Charlie Fox 15 is this point here, so it would take me straight to Charlie Fox 15, while we are actually supposed to follow this routing and this arc. So we'll fly this part manually. When intercepting, we can then continue on the pre-programmed flight with the restrictions that are there. Also to note is the profile here. 14 DME from Santorini will be at 3,500 feet. That's where we start our approach. We descend to 3,000 feet before Corax. So Corax will approach at 3,000 feet, and from there we do a 3.3 degree, which is maybe better to see if I zoom in. 3.3 degree descent to the runway. So that's how it's depicted on this chart. We'll have a decision altitude of 1,200 feet, as it's a non-precision approach. We only have lateral guidance. We don't have any glide slope or anything like this. And for the glide slope and to check that we are on the right height all the time, we'll use these distances. So 4 DME from Santorini will have to be at 1,240 feet. So starting on the left-hand side, of course. 8 DME from Santorini will be 2,650 feet, 7 DME 2,300 feet, 6 1,650. So that's checks that we'll do each time while descending. So A DME is just behind Corax here, which is at 9 DME. But we'll come to that a bit later. We'll just repeat the briefing for before we descend. But it's already good to go through it now. So UVRIT, Charlie Fox, here this part we'll fly manually, and then we descend down. Corax, missed approach points, and then we're at the runway 15. So good, that's our flight plan. RATNAV will initialize with the Romeo Delta Sierra VOR. So this is for our departure. Romeo Delta Sierra, we'll need this one at 274 radial to intercept 274. The other one, the Papa Alpha Romeo VR, the second one we'll use after takeoff when we're following the runway heading, to have an indication of how far we are away from the runway. Actually, we would need 2 that can be tracked with a course, but we only have one in Airbus to use, so I'll take this one. Let's see, it's a 245. Alright, so that's our RATNAV initialized. We don't have any ILSs yet, or will not have any later on either. Diff-rip, so the E and B page, we'll put a 0 fuel weight in. The block fuel was 4.7 tons, and we'll put it in here. So this gets initialized. And next is the performance page. So we'll calculate the takeoff performance. We'll do a flaps 1 takeoff, flex to temperature of 55 Celsius to have a bit of reduced thrust, not have all the engine thrust for takeoff. Transition altitude is 6,000 feet, but let's check it again on the chart. 6,000 feet in Rhodes, so that's correct. Next, we can then calculate our V speeds, so V1, V2, and V1, V rotate, and V2, 123 to 128. Next is the climb phase, cruise phase, descent phase, which we'll leave as this. And for the approach, we'll also configure the screen already that we put in 1017 for the QNH of the weather that we got in Rhodes, in Santorini. Temperature was 16 degrees. And this goes in here. Magnetic wind. We actually got a METAR, which is wind related to the true north. Yeah, we should check the variation. It might be 2 degrees. I will put it in like we got it from the METAR at this moment. And the decision altitude is 1,200 feet. We saw that on the approach chart here. Also on top, decision altitude 1,200 feet. So when we don't see the runway at 1,200 feet, we'll have to perform missed approach procedure. And in Santorini, the missed approach procedure is turn left to 315 track to intercept the radial 360 out of Santorini. At 14 DME, we then turn left and we'll reattempt the approach from the Charlie Fox 15 point. So this is known, so just left turn, track the VOR outbound, and then going back for another attempt to land. But so 1,200 feet is our decision altitude. That's in, and then I think we completed the performance page here as well. Good. So let's get back to our checklists. So on top is MCDU data. We checked this, we did the setup of the MCDU. The RATNAV has been set up, IFR clearance and IFR line is complete. The flight plan has been reviewed. If his nav has been entered, takeoff briefing is completed, and then squawk is set. We're not going to use any squawk now. In later streams, we will fly with a VATSIM ATC, and then this will become more important. So the next one is a pre-startup checklist. So we'll make sure that the APU is on, and that's clearly the case. The MCDU weights have been inserted, takeoff performance has been checked, the V-speeds are calculated, the APU bleed will turn this one on, external power can go off, and then air conditioning as required, but that's okay. The other thing we would check here, so the speeds are, there's no specific speeds entered or heading entered. The altitude, we'll put it to the clearance altitude of this departure, which would be 5,000 feet. So from there we'll join the airways and we'll normally already be re-cleared to a higher altitude, so I'll just put 5,000 in the box already. So that's it for the setup. So pre-startup is completed. Now we can do the pushback and the startup, but as you can see, we don't need a pushback in this airport. We'll just start taxi straight out, and to the right the runway is here, runway 24, and we'll taxi to the start of runway 24. Alright, pushback and startup. Windows and doors are closed and locked, so all doors are closed. Cockpit door is still open, so we'll close the cockpit door. Fuel pumps are on. The beacon is something we'll still turn on, indicating that we want to start our engines. Steering pin inserted, transponder to auto. TCAS is standby. The clock will set a clock to run. Parking brake as required, but we leave it off for now, and then we can start the engines by putting the engine mode selector, this switch here, into ignition, and engine master 2 start. Starting the engines, we monitor the N2 percentage at about 24-25%. The fuel flow will come in, and then you'll see the EGT rising, and the N1 should also rise. I should start the clock when starting an engine, so I'm a bit late with this, just to see if it's a normal start for both engines. So I'll stop the clock now because I'm a bit too late. So you see the AGT continuously rising. See the N1 rising, so we're almost at 19%, which is idle for this engine. And then it becomes available, so that's good. We have a good start, and then we start engine number 1 as well by switching on the engine master switch to on. The engine mode selector in ignition, you can see that here. So there's we'll have ignition. Normally it says the A system or the B system, which is being used to provide ignition. In this case, seems to be both. Also here we can see we have fuel flow, and the exhaust gas temperature is there. It's rising, so this engine is starting up at the moment. If you have any questions during the flight or anytime, let me know, and I will try to. I'll try to see if I can answer them. I'm not a real world Airbus pilot, but an enthusiast who wants to bring the information to other people who are interested in flying this Airbus in flight simulation. So we have the second engine also, or the first one I should say, also started correctly and available. So now we can put the engine mode selector back to norm. After this, we can turn off the APU bleed, and we can turn also off the APU itself. So APU master switch off, anti-ice as required, so we will not need it at the moment. So engine has started. We can put our flaps in the takeoff position, so flap 1, what you see going here. Then we can arm the spoilers. We'll also put the max auto brake on. We'll check the flight controls. Let's see if I find the right view. So rudder to the left, you'll see the rudder going to the left, full rudder to the right, down elevator, up elevator, full left aileron and full right aileron, so flight controls are checked. Steering pin is removed. The pitch trim, let me have a look at the CG, so CG is at 25 for this flight, and I can make sure here it's also set to 25. Rudder trim is reset. This button here, and then the steering pin is removed. That's the before taxi checklist complete. So now that we're ready to taxi, we can turn on the taxi lights, runway turn off lights as well. Strobes go to auto, and our parking brake should go to off. So we're ready to taxi. We'll do a takeoff configuration test here, and that's looks like everything is okay. I need to warn the cabin still that we're about to take off, but I'll do that while taxiing. Also, the predictive wind shear is an amber, means that it would still have to be turned on, but this also we do it later. So we advance the thrust levers a little bit, and then back to idle. Let's notify the flight crew.
Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff.
taxi lines in this airport are not really well indicated. So brake test, and that also works. I put the time of day to a reasonable hour so we can see but the surroundings of the islands and the sea, otherwise it would be too dark. Still I'm flying with real time weather, so this is a bit the weather that it's at the moment in Rhodes, a bit cloudy but not too much wind. So I can put the predictive wind shear and the weather radar on at this moment. Reduce the taxi speed a bit to 50 knots, 16. And let's have a quick review of the departure again. So straight out 245 at 10 DME, we turn right and we intercept a 274 radio from the Rhodes. So my VOR 1 is the Romeo Delta Sierra, and VOR 2 is the Papa Alfa Romeo, which you can see down here on the screen, VOR 1 and 2. Before entering runway, we'll still do our last checks. So parking brake on again. Before takeoff checklist now. We'll turn on all the lights. Landing lights, nose wheel, takeoff lights. If I can get it, yes, there it is. Anti-ice is required, PAX is required, TCAS to above, and the mode, let me quickly switch here. So to above, and the mode to traffic alerts and resolution advisory. So there we go. Weather radar is on, predictive wind shear is on, weather mode is required, and takeoff memo no blue, so we are good to go. Parking brake off before takeoff checklist complete. We check the left and the right of the runway that there's nobody using the runway. So let's start the chrono. Engines 40% to spool up. And then when they're stabilized at 40, we can go to the flex thrust, side stick forward. $80 knots, we release the back pressure on the side stick, 200 knots. There is V1, rotate, positive rate, and gear up. So we climb straight ahead until 10 DME from the Papa Alfa Romeo, so on this side 10 DME. We just crossed the VOR as it was at the beginning of the runway. Lever climb. Thrust climb. Alt blue to 5,000 feet. We can stay on this speed. So 2 nautical miles from the VOR. We'll continue to climb to 220, our cruise flight level. And we change to standard now, above 6,000 feet. We can retract the flaps. You'll see we'll cross the radial once before we are going to intercept it afterwards. Still another 10 DME. So we continue our climb. Above 10,000 feet, we can take out the landing lights. And our 10 DME, so we turn to the right to intercept the VOR. Radio 274. You see the needle already moving a bit closer here. And since this point is quite close to our flight plan here, so we're exactly on the route that we wanted to be on, I'll enable the autopilot, which will then continue the navigation from here. So alt blue still, nav enabled, and we'll be soon overhead 5s. I'll increase the range a little bit now. Ground spoilers can be disarmed and the passengers can also be released. So 16,000 feet, we have 6,000 feet to go until our cruising flight level. I'll already start with the calculation of the descent, at least the point of descent, to be sure we don't overshoot it. So for this we can use a flypad next to us, and there's a top of descent calculator. We enter the altitude at which we would be on, so 20,000, 22,000 roughly. Where do we want to go to in the beginning of our departure, of our arrival? In the initial approach fix here at UVRIT, we have to be above 3,500 feet, and we'll have to be above 3,500 feet for the entire duration here, and Corax 3,000 feet. So I think it will be good enough to be at 6,000 feet more or less when at UVRIT. So we'll find out how much track miles we need to descend by entering the target altitude of 6,000 feet. We need about 50 nautical miles before we descend. So 50 nautical miles before UVRIT we should descend. And using yet another nice feature from the FlyByWire team, we can use the fixed info page in the flight plan to actually draw a circle around UVRIT of 50 nautical miles. So to go to the fixed info page, you click on flight plan, first bottom on the right, and then fixed info on the right, on the left and on the right. Over it, you put any kind of reference in the database in here, and it's a known reference. Then you can either draw a radial and or a radius around this point. So I'll put 50 nautical miles now in here, and you'll see this appears on the primary flight display. So we really don't have a lot of time before we have to start our descent again, so we'll be 20 nautical miles, something like this, maybe 30, before we have to go and start descending again. At Gilos, more or less, we start our descent to be at 6,000 feet in UVRIT. Another preparation I'd like to do for the landing is also to check what we need for flying our manual approach here, since it's not supported in the autopilots yet. We'll put in a 14 DME arc around Santorini, so we can make sure that we stay on or outside of this boundary to fly the VOR approach. So 14 nautical miles is interesting. Let's put it into the next fix info. So Santorini was SNI, it's a VOR, it's a reference point that he knows, radial of 14 nautical miles, and again here on the screen you see this little circle being drawn around, so very easy to use, can't miss it. And one more addition that we could use this for, just to try and demonstrate the functionality that's available here. We can also add the radials that we would need for this approach. So the 155 is quite straightforward. It will already be in our flight plan as the green line to follow, but still it's good to have the references, as long as you are aware what the references mean. Also the missed approach radial would be good to enter in here. And the third one, if there's space for doing that, is this radial 048, because in our flight plan now we have UVRIT, but then just a direct to Charlie Fox 15. Actually we should be flying 5 nautical miles on this 045 radial to Santorini VOR. So we'll put this one in as well. To do this, and we're almost already at the descent point. Let me see again, what was the radial? So the 048 and the 155. 048 radial in Santorini, and you see it showing up as this line here. So from UVRIT we know we have to fly this little piece here to then go to fly the arc. The 155 we could put in, but I'm not going to put it in now, as it's quite clear on the flight plan itself. The other one is 360 for a missed approach, so this one is more useful. If you have to do a missed approach, then we can use this radio to fly outbound and do a reattempt of the approach. Let's put it a bit bigger now, and let's enjoy the scenery for the moment. It's mainly sea, but lots of little islands and things to explore. Seem to be some gust or so. Let's get back to the cruising altitude now. "23 minutes on the way from the moment we started the plane at the gate until now. So we're at the top of descent, more or less. So I'll put in 6,000 feet now, assuming we've been cleared to 6,000 feet by air traffic control, and start our descent. I'll also remove the circle because it's going to be distracting if there's too many of those. To remove it, just press clear on the reference, and then this goes away. We can go back to the flight plan, and we'll just see the arc to fly and missed approach radio. So for the descent, we'll put a TCAS to below, because we're not interested anymore in what's above, or at least we want to see more of the airplanes that are below in the descent. Then above we will still get to, I think, 2,700 feet information of airplanes above us. A new addition again from the fly-by-wire team, the TCAS. So there's not a lot of planes or traffic around here, so we won't see any conflicting traffic coming, but in more populated areas we would definitely have other airplanes. So the approach briefing, we completed it. Nav-aids have been reviewed. We can also set up the nav-aids here now in the MCDU, the ones we'll be using, so we'll definitely use the Santorini VOR. Let's have a look again at the procedure. So yeah, VOR approach of 155 is the course that we'll need. I'll also put in the second VOR instrument here. There's no other beacons or NDVs that we can use, so that's basically the setup for now. $14,000 feet and still descending. So let's review the procedure for the landing that we selected now. We'll land on runway 15. It's a VOR non-precision approach on this runway. We'll have UVRIT as our initial approach fix. From UVRIT we go 228 track to 16 DME from Santorini VOR. It's about 5 nautical miles. And then we turn right towards turn right on the 14 DME arc, minimum of 3,500 feet. At before the Charlie Fox 15 point, we turn left to intercept the 155 radial into Santorini, and we'll be overhead in Corax 9 DME from the VOR. Then we start our descent, so we have to be at 3,000 feet in Corax. So we're descending between Charlie Fox 15 and Corax to be at 3,000 feet over there. And then we descend at a 3.3 degree angle to the runway, checking our altitudes over here. Missed approach is turn to the left, 315, and follow the 360 radial outbound 14 DME from Santorini. We turn left again and we do the approach again. So here we will, when overhead, UVRIT will turn left, or just before we'll turn left to have this flying nose radial, and then turn to the right to fly on the arc, and so into Santorini. I think we can expect landing into the sun, so let's hope that's going to be not going to be an issue. Below 10,000 feet, we should have turned on our landing lights already. In Santorini, the transition altitude is also 6,000 feet, if I'm not mistaken. It's specified by ATC, so it's not 6,000. Performance page of the approach. Quick review on 017, 16, and that's the wind. We can request the latest weather to be sure. So here on this page we can send a request for the 3 airports, so we'll also have the weather of Athens, our alternate, in case we really can't land in Santorini. And then we'll get those as messages in the MCDU. So this is the latest METAR. Have a look at Santorini. 16 degrees, that's still correct. And there's no wind at all. 1017 is also the QNH, so that's good. Alright, we're almost at UVRIT, so let's turn left to 228. And let's go on the QNH. I'll also reduce the speed. $16 DME from Santorini, we can turn right to follow the 14 DME arc. So let's turn right. And I'll get rid of this first radial. And let's turn a bit more, because we're now closer than 14 DME. From Santorini. And we'll descend to 3,500 feet. Let's keep following the arc here. There's also wind from the 224, so we have to take that into account that we're pushed away from the arc at this moment if we are just trying to keep the same heading. And let's put in the direct to Charlie Fox 15 to continue on our flight plan. I'll activate the approach phase. And let's turn on the anti-ice. So now we're turning left, intercepting normally the VOR, so we're just following the plan, so we can also monitor with the VOR Rhodes here, or fly this manually, but I'm going to let the plane fly this. So now we have to descend to 3,000 feet to be incorrect at 3,000 feet. We can take out flap 1, speed check. The island is behind all of the clouds, so we will not have a lot of view here. And the sun is on our right side, so that could be good. So from Corax we descend to 3.3 degree angle, so for this we activate FPA, and then the 3.3 we can dial it in here. Once overhead Corax we start our descent. So I'll also take out, oops, speed mode is back. Let's descend. Slow down as well. Flaps 2. Oh. Flaps 2 and gear down. Let's make sure the seatbelt signs are on. All our lights are on. Cabin crew is notified.
Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.
Spoilers are armed and flaps full.
100 above.
So we have the airport in sight.
Minimum 1,000.
And let's take out the autopilot now. We have a wind coming from the right, so there will be a little bit of crosswind. A little bit high.
500. 400. 400. 300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30, 20, retard.
I'll do a go around here. So we turn to the left. Just leave us back to climb now. So turn left to the 315 track and then intercept the 360 radial of Santorini. Yeah. The approach was not stable enough to continue landing. I think it was related to the crosswind that I was anticipating but wasn't coming lower. So there's our radio. which will follow outbound. Now we're on the same line that was drone. And then once we are at 14 DME, we'll turn left again and intercept the 155 radial back into Santorini. Looking at the map here, we're also following the missed approach path. So once at 14, we'll turn around and try the approach again. So 13.5. I thought I could input the approach again, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So we have the other guidance line now. Put it at 155. That's the final track that we want to follow, the radial that we want to intercept. A little bit more to the left now. And we can start our descent. Because at Corax 9 DME, we need to be at 3,000 feet. So now we're 14 DME, 13.7. So we're just inside the arc again and flying towards Corax. Yeah, which is here. We're on the radio now, so we don't want to overshoot it either. 12 nautical miles. We'll take out flaps 1. And flaps 2 as well. Our gear can go down. At 9 DME, we'll do a 3.3 degree descent again. Let's make sure our lights are still on. And let's start the descent now. Flaps are full. Correcting to be on the VOR still. Auto brakes are low.
2,500.
So we're at 7.8. At 7 we should be at 2,300. Which is exact more. Yeah, 7 is 2,300. So 1,950 at 6. We're at 6.7 now. Let's arm the spoilers, notify the cabin crew again.
Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.
We have the runway in sight. That's a much more stable approach than before. Landing checklist if is as required, navigation display terrain as required, gear down in green, exterior lights all, nose wheel light is to take off, auto brakes are set, spoilers are on, landing, 3 flaps are landing, and landing memo no blue. So take out the autopilot,
100 above.
just 2 small corrections, 100 above our minimum.
Minimum.
We can go land.
1,000.
A bit too low, correcting.
Five hundred. 400. 300. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. 10.
Into the
5.
flare. Reverses. Auto brake. Let's help the auto brake. Reverses off under 60 knots. And let's brake to maybe make this exit still. Yes, ground speed of 15 knots is fine. So welcome to Santorini. 2 attempts, but it's always good to try these maneuvers. Let's turn off the landing lights now, and I want to keep the nose wheel taxi light. And find a spot here in Santorini. We retract the flaps. We disarm the spoilers. And we can start the APU. Predictive wind shear and the weather radar should go off. TCAS should also be on standby. Wing and GIs in the engine, GIs can go off now. So again, welcome to Santorini here. I hope you enjoy the flight, and maybe a bit stupid to not do a first landing right, but better to do a second attempt than to crash. We'll park the airplane here. There's not really a stand lined out, but at least we have some view on typical white buildings in Santorini. We'll put on the parking brake. APU, we'll check if it started. It started, so we can safely turn off the engines. And the plane continues to have electricity. Good. Thanks so much for joining the stream. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.